You'd think trash day in the suburbs would be the simplest part of the week. Put the cans out, wait for the truck, and drag them back in. That's it. But when you live in an HOA neighborhood, nothing is ever simple. My name's Daniel, and for the last 6 months, I've been at war with the HOA, not over paint colors, or lawn heights, or fences, no. My battle was over something much dumber. A trash can, and not just any trash can. My trash can, it started on a Tuesday morning. I walked out to the curb like I always do, cup of coffee in hand, ready to roll my bin back up the driveway. Except, my bin wasn't upright. It was on its side, lid cracked open. Contents spilling onto the road like some kind of humiliating confession of how much pizza I eat. I frowned. The garbage truck had already come through, and usually the drivers are careful. I figured maybe it was an accident. Wind, maybe. A stray animal. No big deal. But the next week, it happened again. And the week after that, by the 4th week, I knew it wasn't random. Someone was doing this on purpose, and it didn't take me long to figure out whose name was Marjorie. But everyone in the neighborhood called her Karen. You know the type. Bob-cut blonde hair, sunglasses on cloudy days. HOA handbook clutched in one hand like a holy scripture, and the ability to ruin your morning just by existing too close to your property line. Marjorie lived 3 houses down. She had an obsession with appearances. If your lawn grew half an inch too long, she'd send a complaint. If your Christmas lights were up a day past New Year's, she'd write an email. And me. I had apparently committed the ultimate suburban crime. Placing my trash can at the curb the night before pickup, it was allowed. Perfectly fine by city regulations. But the HOA, they had a rule buried deep in their nonsense handbook. Bins should only be placed out the morning of scheduled collection. Nobody followed it. Nobody cared. Except Marjorie. And since she couldn't find me without dragging the entire HOA board into it, she found her own way to enforce the rule. By knocking my bin over every single week. At first, I tried ignoring it. I mean, how much energy can you spend being mad at a trash can? But you'd be surprised. It eats at you. You start dreading Tuesdays. You start watching from the window, waiting for it to happen. And the worst part? She knew I knew. One morning, I caught her red-handed. I was standing behind my living room curtain, sipping coffee, when I saw her march down the street like she owned the pavement. She looked left, looked right, and then shove. My bin tipped over, spilling last night's leftovers onto the asphalt. She actually smirked, straightened her sunglasses, brushed her hands together like she'd done the neighborhood a service. Kent kept walking. I wanted to march outside, scream at her, call her every name in the book. But instead, I bit my tongue. Because sometimes, anger is wasted. Sometimes, it's better to plan, and I planned. The first idea was simple. Put a GoPro in the window. Catch her in the act, and present the footage to the HOA board. But then I remembered the board was her. Or, at least, she controlled half of them. Evidence wouldn't matter. She'd spin it. No, I needed something better. Something she couldn't wriggle out of. So I decided to build a trap. Not a dangerous one. I'm not crazy. But something that would stop her dead in her tracks. Something that would humiliate her the same way she humiliated me. And when I say I built a trap, I mean it. I went down to the hardware store. Bought plywood, springs, a few motion sensors, and a gallon of industrial-strength slime. Don't ask why they sell slime. Just be glad they do. For 2 weeks, I worked in my garage like a mad scientist. The neighbors probably thought I was building a rocket. But no, what I was building was better. A trash can she would never see coming. When it was finished, it looked like an ordinary bin. Green plastic, lid slightly scratched, wheels squeaking just like the old one. But inside, it was rigged with a simple mechanism. If someone tipped it past a certain angle, A motion trigger would release the slime, right out of a nozzle facing the attacker now. Slime doesn't sound scary until you realize it's neon green, sticky as glue, and smells faintly like rotting eggs. You get that on your clothes, your hair, your sunglasses, it's a nightmare. I placed my new bin at the curb, heart pounding. This was the week. This was the showdown. And sure enough, right on schedule. I saw her coming. Marjorie strutted down the sidewalk, HOA handbook in one hand, reusable Starbucks cup in the other. She glanced around like a cat about to pounce. My bin stood waiting, innocent as ever. Then dash shove, and in the same instant, test PLO, the nozzle fired. Slime sprang upward in a glorious arc, coating her from chest to hair. The Starbucks cup went flying. She shrieked loud enough to wake up half the neighborhood. I swear, time slowed down. The look on her face was priceless. Her perfect hair, ruined. Her pristine blouse, ruined. Her aura of superiority, dripping with green sludge. She stumbled back. Flailing, slipped on the spilled coffee. An end fell right on her butt. I almost burst out laughing right there behind my curtain. But I held it in, because this was just the beginning. Because when you set a trap like that, you're not just protecting your trash can. You're declaring war. And let me tell you, HOA. Karen wasn't about to let that slide. Asterisk, I should have known it wouldn't end there. When I unleashed that trap, I thought it was over. I thought she'd slink back into her perfect little HOA bubble, lick her wounds, and finally, leave me alone. But if there's one thing I learned about Marjorie, about Karens in general, it's that humiliation doesn't make them stop. It makes them double down. The morning after the slime incident, I woke up to find a folded piece of paper taped to my front door. Big, bold letters on the outside. Violation notice. I groaned, peeled it off, and opened it up. Inside was a list of every petty infraction she could possibly make up. Grass too long, it wasn't. Trash bin placed at curb too early, her favorite. Fence needs repainting, it didn't. Mailbox leaning slightly to the left's newsflash. It wasn't at the bottom. Written in her scratchy, self-righteous handwriting was, "This is your final warning before fines are issued. The HOA has authority over your property, and non-compliance will result in legal action." I actually laughed. Legal action. Over grass, a mailbox, and a trash can. But then I stopped laughing. Because I knew she wasn't just bluffing. She had influence. She'd twist the board members around her little finger. And suddenly I'd be fighting fines, liens, maybe even court. That was her game. She didn't care if the rules were real or not. She just wanted control. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about trash cans. This wasn't even about the HOA. This was about power. But here's the thing. I've got a stubborn streak. And once you cross me, I don't back down. So I came up with a new plan. The first step was evidence. Not the kind of blurry phone video she could brush off. Real evidence. I set up cameras, discreet ones, not just on my house, but at the edge of my yard facing the street. Little black domes hidden under the eaves. Night vision, motion-activated, cloud storage. If she even looked at my bin, funny, I'd have it on tape. The second step was patience. I knew she'd come back. The slime might have shocked her. But people like Marjorie can't resist proving they're in charge. And sure enough, the very next trash day. There she was. I was sipping coffee by the window again. It had become a ritual when I spotted her marching down the street. Only this time, she was armed. She had gloves. A towel draped over her arm. And she wasn't alone. She had her husband with her, a tall, lanky guy named Greg, who always looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. They stopped at my driveway. Marjorie pointed at my trash can like it was a crime scene. Greg sighed, bent down and tried to shove it over. The can didn't budge. See, after the slime incident, I upgraded. Reinforced the base with weights. Anchored it to a hidden concrete slab beneath the gravel. To anyone else, it looked normal. But to Greg, it must have felt like trying to tip over a vending machine. He shoved again. Nothing. Marjorie barked something at him. I couldn't hear. But I could imagine, and he tried again, straining, grunting. Sweat dripping down his forehead. Finally. The bin tilted just enough to trigger the mechanism. This time, instead of slime, a jet of bright red dye blasted out. Splattering across both of them, it was the same dye used for construction markings. Stained skin for days. Stains clothes forever. Greg stumbled back, arms out like he'd been shot. Marjorie shrieked again, clawing at her face. Streaks of red dripping down her neck like blood. From my window, I couldn't help myself. I laughed. Out loud. Loud enough that Greg probably heard, and that's when Marjorie snapped. She whipped around, eyes blazing, and shouted something I couldn't make out. Then she stormed off, dragging her poor, red-stained husband behind her. I knew right then I'd just escalated the war. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, no letters, no visits, no complaints until Saturday morning. That's when I noticed the flyers. They were stapled to the community bulletin board, taped to mailboxes, even tucked under doormats. Each one had a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my house, specifically my trash can at the top. Bold letters screamed, "Nuisance, neighbor alert." Below, in a wall of text, she accused me of all sorts of things. Illegal modifications, dangerous booby traps, unsanitary waste practices, threatening behavior. She even claimed I'd attacked her and Greg physically, which was insane. But here's the kicker. She invited the entire neighborhood to an emergency HOA meeting at the clubhouse to discuss disciplinary action against the homeowner at 412 Oak Ridge Drive. That was me. She wasn't just playing dirty. She was trying to publicly shame me, to rally the whole neighborhood against me. And that's when I decided, if she wanted war, to give her war. Not just pranks. Not just slime. A full-scale takedown, because if she thought she was the only one who could play politics, she was dead wrong. I showed up to that meeting early. Sat in the back row, arms crossed, calm as a monk. One by one, neighbors trickled in. Some curious, some annoyed, some whispering to each other. Then Marjorie swept in like a queen entering her throne room. Freshly pressed blouse, pearls around her neck, not a trace of red dye left. She strutted to the front, cleared her throat, and began her little speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we have a serious problem in this community. One that threatens the safety, cleanliness, and reputation of Oak Ridge." She gestured dramatically toward me. Every head turned. "This man," she continued, "has been defying our rules, endangering others, and creating a hostile environment with his trash can contraptions." There were murmurs. Some people nodded. Others frowned. I stayed quiet. Calm because I was waiting. See, I'd come prepared. When she finally paused for breath, I stood. "Funny," I said, "because I seem to remember you trespassing on my property, repeatedly damaging my bin, harassing me. Should I roll the footage?" Her face drained of color. I pulled out my phone, mirrored it to the clubhouse TV, and hit play. There it was, clear as day. Marjorie shoving my bin, smirking. Greg struggling. Both of them getting blasted with slime. Then dye. The room erupted. Gasps. Laughter. A couple of people even clapped. Marjorie sputtered, waving her hands. That's taken out of context. He set traps. Dangerous, but it was too late. The damage was done. Her authority cracked like glass, and in that moment, I knew I'd won the battle. But the war. Oh, the war was just getting started, because people like Marjorie don't forgive. They don't forget, and when you humiliate them in front of their kingdom, they come back sharper, meaner, desperate, and trust me when I say, I had no idea how far she was willing to go. Asterisk. The look on Marjorie's face that night at the clubhouse burned itself into my shock rage. Humiliation. If looks could kill, I'd have dropped dead on the spot. But she didn't kill me with a look. She had other plans, and over the next few weeks, I started to see what happens when you back a cornered Karen into a wall. It began with little things. I came home from work one evening and found my mailbox wide open. Junk mail scattered across the lawn like confetti. The next morning, my lawn sprinklers mysteriously wouldn't turn on. After crawling around with a flashlight, I discovered the valve had been tampered with. Someone had actually unscrewed it just enough to leak. Then one night, around 11 p.m., I heard it, a faint scratching sound at the side of my house. I bolted outside with a flashlight, heart pounding. But by the time I got there, nothing. No one. Just the trash can standing silent in the moonlight, like bait waiting to be touched. I knew it was her. I didn't need proof. It had her signature all over its small, petty sabotages meant to wear me down. And for a while, I almost let it. Because here's the thing about living under constant harassment. It seeps into your brain. You start second-guessing everything. Did I leave that gate open, or did she sneak in? Did I forget to lock the car, or is she waiting for me to slip? Sleep got harder. I'd wake up at the sound of a branch scraping the window, convinced it was her. I'd peek through the blinds at 2 a.m., just waiting to catch her creeping along the sidewalk. But she was too smart for that. She knew how to hide her hand, and that scared me more than the slime ever scared her. Then came the letter. This one wasn't taped to my door. It came certified mail. Official letterhead, lawyer's name at the bottom. I ripped it open, scanned the first few lines, and felt my stomach sink. The HOA was suing me. Negligence, endangerment, property damage, violation of community standards. She'd actually done it. She dragged the entire HOA board into her personal vendetta and convinced them to take me to court. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the letter crumpling in my fists. I wasn't scared of losing money. I was scared of losing ground. If she beat me in court, she'd own me. She'd never stop. But as I sat there in the dim light, something shifted inside me. Fear gave way to anger. Anger gave way to resolve. If Marjorie wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. The first move was obvious. Dig up dirt. I started watching her. Not just trash day watching, full-on surveillance. Cameras on my property angled discreetly toward hers. A dash cam running whenever I drove past her house. Notes scribbled down of her comings and goings, and it didn't take long before I struck gold. One Tuesday night, around midnight, I caught her husband Greg dragging 2 giant bags of yard waste down the street. He didn't dump them at their curb. No, he dumped them behind the community clubhouse. A clear violation of HOA disposal rules. I clipped the footage, filed it away, and smiled. Next week, it was worse. Greg again. Only this time, he wasn't dragging yard waste. He was dragging an old mattress. And where did it end up? Propped against the back wall of the clubhouse like a dirty secret, another clip. Another piece of evidence. By the third week, I had a whole collection. Enough to bury her precious image of perfection. But here's the part that really twisted the knife. One Saturday afternoon, I was reviewing footage when I caught something I wasn't supposed to see. Marjorie, herself. She was sneaking out of her house, looking around nervously, carrying a bag of recyclables. Instead of walking to her own bin, she crept 3 houses down and dumped the bag into someone else's container. Why? Simple. She didn't want her neighbors to know how much wine she went through. Case of Chardonnay bottles. Week after week, it was small, it was petty, but it was hypocrisy. And in HOA land, hypocrisy is the one sin you can't spin away. Armed with this, I made my move. The next HOA meeting rolled around. Smaller turnout this time, probably because most folks were tired of the drama. But Marjorie was there, pearls glistening. Smile fake as ever. She launched into another one of her tirades about my unacceptable behavior. And then I pulled out my phone. "Funny you say that," I said. "Because I've noticed some unacceptable behavior myself." I hooked the phone up to the TV again. Played the clips one by one. Greg dumping yard waste. Greg abandoning a mattress. Marjorie sneaking recyclables into other bins. The room turned on her instantly. Murmurs of disgust. A couple of neighbors actually booed. Greg turned beet red. Marjorie's mouth flapped like a fish out of water, and me. I sat back, calm as could be, letting the evidence speak for itself. When it was over, I stood. "So if we're going to talk about fines, maybe we should start with your queen here. Seems like she's been breaking more rules than anyone." The board members exchanged glances. One of them cleared his throat and said, We'll need to review this." Translation: she was screwed. I walked out of that meeting feeling 10 feet tall. I'd not only defended myself, I'd turned the spotlight on her. But that was my mistake, because humiliating her privately was one thing. Doing it publicly, that was a whole new level. I hadn't just defended my trash can. I'd declared myself her enemy, and people like Marjorie don't rest until they destroy their enemies. That night, I came home to something I'll never forget. I rolled into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the yard. And there it was, my trash can. Not standing. Not tipped, destroyed, the lid ripped off. Wheels smashed. Sides caved in like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a message. She wasn't playing games anymore, and for the first time since this whole thing started. I realized I might have pushed her too far. The sight of my trash can lying there in pieces. It did something to me. At first, I just stared, frozen. Like maybe if I blinked hard enough, it would fix itself. But no. The jagged plastic, the wheel cracked in half. The lid splintered. It was real. She'd finally crossed the line. This wasn't passive-aggressive anymore. This wasn't about rules or appearances. This was vandalism, retaliation, an open declaration that the HOA Queen Bee wasn't just playing defense, she was on the attack. I killed the engine and stepped out of the car. The night air was sharp, carrying the faint smell of plastic dust and garbage that hadn't quite been rinsed out of the bin before it met its violent end. I crouched down, ran my fingers along the smashed rim. The cracks told a story. Multiple hits, deliberate force, probably a bat, maybe even a hammer. And judging by the way the pieces were scattered across the driveway, she hadn't been subtle about it. No, she'd wanted me to see this. Wanted me to feel it, and I did. I felt fury burn through my chest like fire. But under that fury was something else. Something colder. A realization if she was willing to do this, she was willing to go further. I barely slept that night. Tossed and turned, eyes flicking toward the window every time a car drove by. My brain kept replaying images of her Marjorie in her pearls. Smug grin twisting into rage as she raised a bat over my bin. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't calling the cops. Not yet. If I did, she'd deny everything, twist it around, make it seem like I was harassing her. She was good at that. Too good. No, if I wanted this to end, I had to outsmart her. I had to hit back harder, so I went shopping, not for a new trash can. That would have been too easy. No, I bought 3. one standard bin. One industrial-strength container, reinforced with steel inside the walls. And one special project. The special one looked normal on the outside. But inside, I lined it with aluminum foil, rigged up a small battery, and attached an old car horn I'd ripped from the junkyard. A motion sensor sat at the base, wired to the horn. The setup was simple. Tip the bin. Trigger the horn. It wouldn't hurt anyone. But it would scare the life out of them. And scare, I decided, was the new game trash day rolled around again. I put all 3 bins out. 2 at the curb, side by side. The third, the rigged one, I placed just a little closer to the sidewalk, like bait. Then I waited. Morning came and went. Noon passed. Nothing. I started to think maybe she'd finally given up. But around 3 p.m., as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the street, I saw her, Marjorie, alone this time. She walked briskly, eyes locked on my bins like a predator spotting prey. My heart raced as she approached. She slowed near the bait bin, glanced around, and SMIRKED, then dash shove. The motion sensor tripped, and the horn blared. Woon. The sound shattered the quiet street, loud and violent, echoing between houses. Birds scattered from trees. A dog 2 blocks over started barking, and Marjorie. She screamed, her arms flailed, pearls clattering against her neck as she stumbled backward, tripping over the curb. She hit the pavement with a hard thud, scrambling like a crab as the horn blared on and on. She clawed her way up, face red with fury, and bolted down the sidewalk. I was laughing so hard I had tears in my eyes. But as I laughed, a part of me knew I hadn't beaten her. I'd only fueled her fire. That night proved me right. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard it. A loud thump against the side of my house. I bolted upright in bed. Heart hammering, another thump. Then a scraping sound, like something being dragged across the siding. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs, every floorboard creaking under my weight. When I reached the front door, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the knob, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then crash. Glass shattering. Not from the door. From the back, I spun and sprinted toward the kitchen. My flashlight beam shook as I rounded the corner and froze. The back window was broken. Shards glittered across the tile floor. The curtains swayed in the night air, and just beyond it, in the faint moonlight, I caught a glimpse. A figure, short, stocky, shoulders hunched, hair unmistakable, even in the dark. Marjorie, she was in my backyard, and she was inside my house. I didn't shout, didn't move. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. This wasn't petty revenge anymore. This wasn't trash cans or dye or slime. This was breaking and entering. I slowly backed into the hallway, adrenaline flooding my veins. My first instinct was to call the police. But my phone was upstairs, and before I could move another step, I heard her voice. Low, cold. You think you're clever, don't you? The hair on the back of my neck stood up. She was inside, somewhere in my house. Marjorie was stalking me, and that's when I realized the war wasn't about trash cans anymore. It was about survival. Asterisk, I stood there in the dark, back pressed against the hallway wall. Heart pounding so hard I thought she could hear it. Marjorie. Inside my house, it was one thing for her to smash my trash can. One thing to plaster my name across the HOA bulletin. But breaking into my home, that was a line I didn't think even she would cross. And yet, here she was. The faint sound of glass crunching under shoes echoed from the kitchen. A shadow moved across the wall as she crept deeper inside. You've been laughing at me, she said, her voice a venomous whisper, making me a fool. In front of everyone, my grip tightened on the flashlight. I thought about bolting for the stairs, grabbing my phone, calling 911. But something told me if I turned my back, I'd never make it, so I stayed still, silent. Listening, she moved closer. The floor creaked beneath her weight. My whole body screamed to run, but I forced myself to stay. "Where are you, Daniel?" she hissed. "Come out. Let's talk face to face." The flashlight felt heavy in my hand, almost like a weapon. That's when I realized I had a choice. I could be the victim, or I could end this. I stepped into the kitchen doorway and flicked on the light. "Looking for me," I said. She froze mid-step, a shard of glass crunching under her heel. Her face twisted, caught between shock and fury. Finally, she sneered. "You think you're so clever with your little games? Your traps. But you don't get it, do you? This is my neighborhood, my rules. And you," she jabbed a finger at me, "you don't belong here." She took another step forward. And that's when I saw something glinting in her hand. A screwdriver. Long, sharp, gripped tight like a knife. My throat went dry. "You need help, Marjorie," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm. "You break into my house with a weapon and you think I'm the problem?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't twist this. You humiliated me. You made me look weak." "Nobody makes me look weak." She lunged forward. I barely had time to react. I swung the flashlight down hard, catching her wrist with a sickening crack. The screwdriver clattered to the floor, skittering under the table. She shrieked, stumbling back, clutching her arm. For a second, I thought she'd retreat. But then she snarled, hair falling out of place, eyes wild. "You'll regret that," she spat. "You'll regret all of this." We stood there in a standoff. My flashlight raised, her chest heaving. The night air pouring in through the broken window. Carrying the sound of crickets, then dash sirens, distant at first, but growing closer. Her eyes widened. I hadn't called them, which meant someone else had. A neighbor must have heard the crash. Or maybe my cameras had picked up the break-in and triggered the alarm system I'd half forgotten I'd set up. Either way, the flashing red and blue glow began to dance across the walls, and Marjorie panicked. She bolted for the back window, stumbling over shards of glass, scrambling through the broken frame like a wild animal by the time the cops burst through my front door. Guns drawn, she was gone. All that remained was the broken window, the fallen screwdriver, and me standing in the wreckage of what used to be my peace of mind. The officers took my statement, bagged the screwdriver as evidence, and promised they'd find her. But I could see it in their eyes. This wasn't the first time they'd dealt with a neighborhood feud gone bad, and I could see something else, too. Doubt. "She's on the HOA board, right?" One officer asked, jotting notes. "Yeah," I said bitterly. He sighed. "Well, don't be surprised if she spins this. Says you attacked her." People like that. They know how to play the victim. I wanted to argue. To scream that I was the one with broken glass on my floor. That I was the one being hunted in my own house. But I didn't, because I knew he was right. And sure enough, the very next morning, the spin began. I woke up to another flyer. Not taped to my door this time. No, this one was stuffed in every single mailbox on the block at the top. In bold was the headline, "Attacked in his home. HOA member speaks out." Beneath it, a picture of Marjorie. A fresh bandage wrapped around her wrist. Tears in her eyes. A trembling smile like she'd just survived a war zone. Her statement was printed below. Last night, while checking on community safety violations, I was viciously attacked by a homeowner who has repeatedly shown hostility toward the HOA. He struck me without warning, injuring my wrist and endangering my life. I am filing charges and urging the board to take swift action to protect us all from his violent behavior. I crumpled the paper in my hands, rage boiling in my chest. She'd broken into my house with a weapon, and yet somehow she'd twisted it into me being the villain. And the worst part? Some of my neighbors believed her. I saw it in their eyes when I stepped outside. The sideways glances, the whispered conversations, the way Mrs. Peterson across the street clutched her kid's hand tighter when I walked by. The tide was turning. And if I didn't do something fast, I wasn't just going to lose the trash can war. I was going to lose everything that night. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the broken window, the jagged edges still waiting to be replaced. She wanted me gone. That much was clear. But she'd underestimated one thing. I wasn't just some pushover neighbor. I'd fought her this far. I'd trapped her, exposed her, caught her lies on camera, and if she thought she could ruin me with one flyer. She had no idea what was coming next, because I wasn't going to fight her on her terms. Anymore, I was going to end this. On mine. Asterisk, the flyer lay crumpled on my table, but its words still burned in my head. Viciously attacked. Violent homeowner. I wanted to tear every copy off every mailbox in the neighborhood. But I knew better. The more I fought her on her battlefield, the deeper I'd sink into her game. No, if I was going to beat Marjorie, I needed something bigger. Something undeniable. And that's when I remembered the cameras. Weeks ago, when the trash can feud had first started, I'd installed a set of motion-triggered cameras around the house. Half the time, they just picked up squirrels or delivery trucks. But last night, they'd caught everything. The moment she smashed my window. The moment she crept inside with a screwdriver in her hand. The moment she lunged at me, and most importantly, the moment the police arrived before she bolted. It was all there, clear as day. I copied the footage onto a USB drive, heart hammering. This wasn't just evidence. This was the nail in her coffin, but how to use it. I could take it to the cops, sure, but I'd seen the way they looked at me last night. To them, it was just he said, she said. No if I wanted to win this, I couldn't just prove her wrong. I had to expose her publicly, and I knew exactly how the next morning. While the neighborhood was still buzzing with her lies, I set my own trap. I printed a stack of flyers. Not cheap, rushed ones like hers. No, mine were bold, professional. Big block letters across the top. The truth about last night. Below, I included a QR code. No explanation, no context. Just the words, see for yourself. The QR linked straight to a video I uploaded edited footage from my security camera. Start to finish, her breaking the window. Her creeping inside with a weapon. Her lunging at me, no narration. No excuses. Just the raw truth. By noon, the first neighbors had scanned it by 1 o'clock. I started hearing murmurs. By evening, my phone buzzed with text after text from neighbors who'd once believed her. Messages like, "Wow, I can't believe she did that. We're so sorry for doubting. That woman needs to be stopped." The tide was shifting, but so was Marjorie at 7 o'clock sharp. There was a pounding at my door. Not a knock. A pounding. I didn't answer. Just watched from the upstairs window as she stood on my porch, face red, shaking a crumpled flyer in her fist. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she screamed, voice echoing through the cul-de-sac. "You think you can embarrass me?" A porch light flicked on across the street. Curtains twitched. Neighbors began peeking out. "Good. Let them see. You're finished," she shouted. "Do you hear me, Daniel? Finished." She jabbed a finger at my door, spit flying from her lips. This is harassment. This is a smear campaign. You'll regret this. You'll all regret this. And then she stormed off, stomping down my driveway like a woman possessed. For the first time in weeks, I actually smiled, because for once, everyone had seen the real her. Not the polished HOA Karen with her flyers and fake tears. No, They'd seen the unhinged woman who broke into my house and screamed threats on my porch. But my relief was short-lived, because the very next day, I got an email. Not from her, from the HOA board itself. Due to repeated disturbances and escalating conflicts, the board has scheduled an emergency hearing to review your conduct as a homeowner. Attendance is mandatory. I read the message twice, bile rising in my throat. She wasn't backing down. She was going bigger, and now she had the entire HOA behind her. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. She'd already tried to destroy my reputation. Already tried to ruin my peace of mind. Already tried to hurt me in my own home. Now she was coming for the one thing I couldn't afford to lose. My place here. My house. But she still didn't understand. This wasn't just about trash cans anymore. This was war. And she had no idea how far I was willing to go to win it. Asterisk. The letter said hearing, but it felt more like a trial. The HOA board set it up in the community. Center-folding tables lined in a stiff row. Chairs facing them like a makeshift courtroom. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and floor polish. I walked in carrying a folder under my arm. The USB drive tucked safely inside. Across the room, Marjorie was already there. She sat in the front row, wrists still wrapped in a theatrical bandage. Lips pressed into a smug smile. She didn't look at me. Not directly. But the way she shifted in her chair, the way her fingers drummed against her armrest, was clear. She thought she'd already won. The board members shuffled papers, cleared throats, and finally, the president, a balding man with glasses that slid down his nose, spoke. "Mr. Daniels," he began, adjusting his tie. "We've received multiple complaints regarding disturbances at your residence. Aggressive behavior. Hostility toward the HOA. Even violence." His eyes flicked to Marjorie, who lowered her gaze. A picture of wounded innocence. I clenched my jaw. With that in mind, he continued. "We've called this emergency session to discuss possible disciplinary action, up to and including fines, restrictions." And he paused for weight removal from the community. The room murmured. A few neighbors were there, whispering behind their hands. Some looked sympathetic. Others avoided my eyes. Marjorie had been busy. They let her speak first. Of course they did. She rose slowly, clutching her bandaged wrist like it was a fragile relic. "Thank you, Mr. President," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "I never wanted this. I only ever wanted what was best for our community. But Mr. Daniels has made that impossible." She glanced around the room, eyes wide, searching for pity. "I've endured threats. I've endured harassment. And last week," her voice cracked and she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, "I endured an attack in my own neighborhood." Gasps rippled through the room. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." She sat down, folding her hands like a martyr, waiting for justice. And then it was my turn. I didn't stand. Not right away. I let the silence stretch. Let their pity for her linger just long enough. Then I opened my folder. "I brought something," I said calmly. "Evidence. Not rumors. Not tears. Just the truth." I slid the USB drive across the table to the board president. "Play it." The board exchanged confused glances. But after a few clicks and fumbles with the projector, the footage appeared on the screen. The room fell. Silent, they watched as Marjorie smashed my window. Watched as she crawled inside with the screwdriver in. Hand watched as she lunged at me. Watched as the police. Lights flashed outside, every gasp. Every nervous shuffle in the room fueled me. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The footage said it all. When it ended, I leaned back in my chair, arms folded. "Any questions?" I asked. The silence stretched. Then the president cleared his throat, looking visibly shaken. Well, it seems there are conflicting accounts, he stammered. Conflicting. I shot back, that's video. That's not opinion. That's not spin. That's reality. A woman on the board whispered she had a weapon. Another muttered, broke into his house. I could feel the tide shifting again. But then Marjorie stood. No. She cried, her voice shrill. That's not what happened. That video, it's out of context. He lured me there. He set me up. She spun toward the room, desperate, her calm mask cracking. You all know me? I've served this community for 15 years. I keep it safe. I keep it clean. Do you really think I'd do something like that? Her eyes darted, searching for support. But the more she shouted, the more the room pulled away from her, and for the first time, she looked scared. The board recessed to deliberate. Marjorie sat rigid, face pale, sweat glistening on her forehead. I stayed still, calm, because I already knew the truth. When they returned, the president cleared his throat again. After reviewing the evidence, the board finds no cause for disciplinary action against Mr. Daniels. Relief rushed through me like a wave. But then he added, as for Ms. Henderson, we'll be conducting a review of her actions as an HOA officer. Her head snapped up. You can't, she started. But he cut her off. This meeting is adjourned. The gavel came down, and just like that, she was no longer in control. Neighbors filed out, whispering, casting wary glances at her. Some even nodded at me, small signs of solidarity. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd won. But when I stepped outside into the cool night air, I saw her standing alone in the parking lot. Her face twisted with rage, and she mouthed the words across the distance, clear as day. This isn't over. I believed her, because deep down, I knew something she didn't. Neither of us was done fighting. I thought the hearing would be the end. I thought once the board saw the truth, once the neighborhood turned on her, she'd finally back off. I was wrong. Marjorie didn't retreat. She evolved. It started small. My trash pickup mysteriously stopped one week. The city claimed I'd missed payments. Funny, considering I'd set up auto pay months ago. Then my mailbox got stuffed with junk subscriptions I'd never signed up for. Gardening catalogs, free magazine trials, even a bizarre flyer for a goat rental service. Petty, annoying, but survivable. Then came the power outage. One evening, right as the sun dipped low, my entire house went dark. I stepped outside and looked around. Every other house on the block was glowing with TV screens and porch lights. Just mine dead. I checked the breaker. Flipped switches. Nothing. Finally, I went outside, flashlight in hand, and followed the line toward the street. That's when I found it. The electrical box near the curb. Door swinging open. Wires cut clean through. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the damage, my skin crawling. But when I finally looked up, I saw her, Marjorie, standing across the street. Arms folded, smiling, she didn't say a word. Just turned and walked away into the shadows. By the time the power company came out, it was past midnight. They fixed the line, told me to file a police report, but I didn't bother. What was I going to say? My HOA neighbor hates me so much she's cutting my power at night. They'd laugh me out of the station. No. This wasn't about the police anymore. This was about me and her. And one of us wasn't going to stop the next day. I found something else. On my front porch, tucked neatly under the welcome mat, was a Polaroid, a photo of me, taken through my own living room window. I sat down hard on the steps, bile rising in my throat. My hands shook as I flipped it over. On the back, in thick black marker, were 3 words, still watching you. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, lights off, staring out the window, waiting. Every creak of the house set me on edge. Every rustle of leaves outside felt like footsteps at one point. I thought I saw her silhouette standing by the edge of my yard, just beyond the reach of the streetlight by the time I blinked. She was gone. Neighbors started whispering more openly after that. Some avoided me entirely, afraid to be caught in the crossfire. Others came up quietly, offering support. "She's dangerous," Mrs. Peterson whispered one afternoon, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "We've all seen it. But no one wants to be her next target." I nodded, but inside, the truth nodded me. I wasn't just her target. I was her obsession. Days turned into weeks. The harassment didn't stop. My car tires got slashed in the middle of the night. My dog, Sweet Old Max, came back from the yard with a gash across his side, like someone had tried to scare him off. That one nearly broke me. I found myself sitting at the vet's office, holding Max's paw, rage boiling in my chest. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to pack up, sell the house, and run. But every act of cruelty only hardened my resolve. I wasn't leaving, not until this ended. One night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of evidence I'd collected: photos, security footage, timestamps, even that Polaroid. It hit me then. This wasn't about catching her in the act anymore. It was about outsmarting her, setting a trap. One final trap she'd never walk away from. Because if she wanted war, then war was exactly what she was going to get. Asterisk, I'd had enough. Enough of the games. Enough of the sabotage. Enough of waking up every night wondering what she'd try next. If Marjorie wanted a war, then I was going to give her one. On my terms, I spent 3 days preparing. First, I checked every camera, every angle. Upgraded the motion sensors, replaced old batteries, installed backups inside the house. Then, I bought supplies. Heavy-duty locks, reinforced glass for the back window, and one more thing: a set of high-powered floodlights with motion triggers. If she came creeping around again, she wasn't going to hide in the shadows this time. And last, I baited the trap. I set my trash can out by the curb, same place it had always been. Same can she'd knocked over a dozen times before. Only this time, it wasn't empty. I rigged the inside with a noise trigger. The second she touched it, my cameras would start recording, and the floodlights would kick on, bathing her in blinding white light. And if that didn't stop her, I'd be waiting. The night came. I sat in the dark, every nerve on fire, eyes glued to the live feed on my phone. Hours ticked by. Midnight, 1, 2, then dash movement. The camera at the curb flickered to life. A shadow approached. Her Marjorie moved slowly, carefully, like she knew she was being watched but couldn't help herself. She reached out, fingers curling over the rim of the can. The second it tilted, the trap sprang. Floodlights blasted on, turning night into day. The sudden roar of sirens I'd wired into the system pierced the air. She staggered back, caught off guard, arms flailing, and I stepped out from the shadows. Smile. "Marjorie," I said, holding up my phone. "You're live." Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide, face twisted in rage. "You think this scares me?" She spat. "You think you can humiliate me again?" She lunged not at the can, not at me, but at the house. Before I realized what she was doing, she bolted across the yard and crashed through the side door I hadn't locked. Alarms wailed inside. Lights flickered on, and just like that, she was in my home again. I chased her. Through the kitchen, down the hallway. The sound of her footsteps pounding like thunder. She grabbed a heavy vase from the counter and hurled it at me. It shattered against the wall, inches from my head. "Stop this, Marjorie!" I shouted, but she didn't listen. She darted into the living room, grabbed a fire poker from beside the fireplace and swung it hard. I barely ducked in time. The metal whooshing past my ear. Her eyes were wild. Bloodshot spit flying from her mouth as she screamed. "You ruined me. You turned them all against me." The poker swung again, this time grazing my shoulder with a sickening thud. Pain shot through me, but adrenaline kept me moving. I lunged, grabbed her wrist, twisted hard. The poker clattered to the floor. She shrieked, scratching, clawing, fighting like a cornered animal. And then her other hand closed around something shiny. The screwdriver, again. For a heartbeat, time slowed. Her face twisted with fury. The blade flashing in the dim light. Her arm driving forward, straight for my chest. I grabbed her wrist with both hands, holding it inches from me. Muscles straining, heart hammering. "You're done," I growled through gritted teeth. "It's over." Her strength wavered. The screwdriver trembled. And with one final surge, I twisted her arm back, sending the weapon clattering across the floor. She stumbled, breathing hard, glaring at me with a hatred so raw it chilled me. But before she could make another move, the front door burst open. "Police? Drop it." Floodlights from patrol cars cut through the windows. Officers swarmed inside, guns raised. Marjorie froze, eyes darting between me, the cops, the weapon on the floor. For the first time, she looked unsure. On the ground. Now, one of the officers barked. Her defiance faltered. She dropped to her knees, hands on her head, snarling through her teeth. "You'll regret this," she hissed at me, voice low, venomous. "You'll regret ever crossing me," but the cuffs snapped shut. The fight, at least for that moment, was over. As they dragged her out, neighbors gathered on the street, watching wide-eyed. Some filmed on their phones. Others whispered Dot and me. I stood there in the doorway, shoulder throbbing, chest heaving, watching as the woman who had terrorized me for months was shoved into the back of a squad car. The flashing lights faded into the night, for the first time in a long time. Silence returned, but I knew it wasn't finished because people like Marjorie didn't just disappear. And even in cuffs, even as she screamed from the back seat, I could feel it. This war wasn't over, not yet. The night Marjorie was hauled away should have been the end, but with people like her, it never ends clean. For weeks afterward, the neighborhood felt different. Lighter, quieter, no more flyers. No more trash can games. No more shadow lingering at the edge of my yard. Neighbors started stopping me on their walks, offering small smiles and awkward apologies. "You were right all along," one whispered. "She fooled us," another admitted. The board voted to strip her of her position, pending trial. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe I could breathe again. But peace never lasts when your enemy lives for chaos. It started with letters, not official flyers, not neat printouts, handwritten notes. Slipped under my door, left on my windshield, jammed into my mailbox. Each one said the same thing, scrawled in uneven handwriting. "You think you're safe." At first, I told myself it couldn't be her. She was in custody, awaiting charges. But then, one night, I turned on the news, and there she was. The anchor's voice was calm. Detached, former HOA board member Marjorie Henderson was released on bail today. My stomach sank. The next evening, I caught her. Not in person. Not in my yard. But on my cameras. Her figure, creeping past the edge of my fence. Pausing just long enough to tilt her head toward the camera. Smiling, and then vanishing back into the shadows. The footage was grainy, but it was her. I knew it. She wanted me to see. She wanted me to know she was back. I doubled down on security locks, lights, alarms. Even considered selling the house, moving somewhere she'd never find me. But deep down, I knew running wouldn't solve anything. Because Marjorie wasn't just a neighbor. She was an obsession, and until one of us broke completely, it would never end. The trial day came. I showed up with everything. The footage, the photos, the police reports. I told my story. The prosecutor laid out the charge: breaking and entering, assault with a weapon, harassment, vandalism, Marjorie. She took the stand with tears in her eyes, spinning tales about how I'd entrapped her, how I'd set her up, how I'd tormented her from the beginning. But this time, the jury didn't buy it. When the verdict came down guilty on multiple counts, I finally felt the weight lift. The judge handed down the sentence: time behind bars. Fines, probation after release. It wasn't forever, but it was something. And for the first time in what felt like years, I walked out of a courtroom with my head high, knowing justice had landed on my side. Weeks passed. The house felt like mine again. Max healed from his wound. The trash can sat peacefully at the curb, untouched. Neighbors stopped whispering and started waving. The board kept to themselves. It almost felt normal. Almost. One night, I was sitting on the porch, sipping a beer, letting the cicadas sing me into calm. That's when I noticed it. A small package, sitting neatly at the edge of the steps, no label, no postage, just waiting. My chest tightened. I bent down slowly, hands trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of newspaper, was a single object, a miniature trash can, and taped to the side, in messy black marker, were 3 words: still watching you. I froze, blood running cold, because whether she'd sent it herself or whether someone else had picked up her game, one truth hit me harder than anything else. The war was never truly over, and maybe it never would be. Asterisk. All right, everyone. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe. Have a great day, night, and I'll see you next time.